Welcome to our quick guide to HURREVAC's reports. HURREVAC has a lot of information to choose from when it comes to analyzing wind forecast hazards. There are ways to visualize and break down that information by probability, by wind speed threshold, by timing, and for one location or across many locations. Though HURREVAC has several wind reports to pick from, you'll probably find a few that work best for your operations. However, it's good to know where to find all of the options and what they mean. The program has a primary focus on the arrival time of 39-mile-per-hour tropical storm force winds, because ideally your protective actions can be completed before the winds get strong enough to down trees and power lines. And we know that forecasts have uncertainty, so that's why it's helpful to consider both deterministic and probabilistic sources. Before we can look at any reports, we must first select a storm and also check that we have the latest advisory. For this example, I'll look at Hurricane Ida from 2021 and start at Advisory 5. My base location is set to Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. There are two ways to access reports in HURREVAC. You'll find location-based reports in the right-click context menu toward the bottom. To create general or multi-location reports, we'll click the Report button in the toolbox at lower left, which opens the right side panel, and then from the Create Report menu, you'll find a list. We'll start with the right-click reports because that's a quick way to access some critical information. And as of Advisory 5, Tropical Storm Ida, located south of Cuba, was forecast to hit Louisiana as a hurricane. So let's zoom into Louisiana and explore some of the right-click reports. Now I've right-clicked inside Jefferson Parish, and when I go to Create Wind Timing Report, note that I have two items in this submenu. I can choose for selected points, which is exactly the coordinates where I right-clicked, or for locality, which is the county or parish that contains the location I right-clicked in. A county or parish is larger than a point, so naturally you'll get some differences in the time of arrival depending on which one you choose. So if you're focused on one particular town or facility, selected point may be more useful. If you're responsible for an entire jurisdiction, the locality option may give you more of the information that you need. To start with, I'll choose that selected point, and notice that a black map marker appears on the map where I right-clicked, and my report loads from the right side panel. The tab lists the type of report, the storm, and the advisory that we selected. We could actually generate many different right-click reports, so this can be useful to help straighten things out. This particular report is broken down into two sections. One for tropical storm threshold at top in the blue, and in the yellow formatting, that's for the strong tropical storm or 58-mile-per-hour threshold. For this example today, we'll focus on the tropical storm threshold in blue. And it's subdivided into two sections, time of arrival and time of departure. And this speaks just to when the tropical storm force wind hazard would be moving in and moving out. The earliest reasonable and most likely columns will correspond as if I'd placed a wind timing flag on either the most likely or earliest reasonable time of arrival graphic. The deterministic time of arrival is based on what time the forecast wind field would cross over that coordinate where I clicked as I animate it forward. Here, 51 hours past the advisory time, or 1 p.m. CDT on Sunday, August 29th. Let's take a quick look at the other option inside Create Wind Timing Report, which is for locality. And right-clicking inside Jefferson Parish or anywhere in Louisiana or any neighboring state, I can generate a similar output, except it's calculating based on the outlines of that locality in which I clicked. And clicking back and forth between the locality-based report and the coordinate-based report, I do have different times of arrival and different forecast hours, again, because the locality is bigger than one point on the map. Now, when an intermediate advisory comes in, like 5A, this information won't change because a new forecast package hasn't come out yet. But when we have our next complete advisory, like Advisory 6, I would either right-click to generate this again or click Update and see the latest and greatest values. It's natural to see some divergence between these numbers, especially when a storm is a long ways out. And it's also common to see these numbers get closer together as a storm gets closer. But it's important to see the trend in these values and also the range of possibilities. When an advisory has just come out, usually within the first minutes after the top of the hour, you might see a TBD result in one of these rows, and that means that the latest information is still being filtered into the system and to check back in about 10 minutes to get the latest values. And one note about time of departure. That is information forecast by the NHC and brought into HURREVAC, but there's no corresponding map layer. But latest reasonable time of departure works like earliest reasonable in reverse, meaning that there's only a 10% chance that the tropical storm force winds would end after that listed time. There's one more right-click based report, and that deals with the wind probabilities. In my context menu, I go to create wind prob report, and for that coordinate where I clicked, and in this new tab, I have a breakdown for my tropical storm, strong tropical storm, and hurricane thresholds. And this is telling me the probability that that wind threshold would start during this 6-hour period. And there's a probability that it would start during the individual time period, which is the value on the left, and the cumulative chance that would have started by that time, which is the value in the right in parentheses. So another way to look at this is there's a 36% chance that our tropical storm force winds start between 7 a.m. Sunday and 1 p.m. Sunday, but also probabilities that it could arrive before that time or after that time. And just remember, when we're looking at this, this is the chance of onset of those winds during the time period, not the chance of occurrence. Now let's explore some multi-location reports. If I didn't already have my right side panel open, remember I would click Reports in the toolbox at lower left. The first item under Create Report is called Storm Statistics. Storm Statistics gives us a tabular breakdown of all the advisory information as well as details for the forecast point, things like position, forward speed, pressure, and winds. So this is not location specific, and it doesn't really show us any hazard information. The next one down is closest approach, and again, this is not a hazard report either, but it does compute the distance of the storm when it's at its closest approach to each county or parish or island in its path, and also what time that would happen. That is followed by probabilistic wind timing. When we're talking about the probabilistic wind timing report, we get a breakdown of earliest and most likely time of arrival for every county or parish that has at least a 5% chance of experiencing tropical storm force winds. So basically anywhere that's included inside the time of arrival graphic. And obviously, as I scroll down, you see this contains a lot of different localities from Texas to Florida. But let's say I worked for a state and I wanted to narrow these results just down to my particular state. This is where setting a base location can be a helpful shortcut. So in the Scope menu above the report, when I click Base State, that limits the report results just to Louisiana. Or I could narrow it down to my base county in particular, or any particular state in the list, like Florida here. Notice that all of the locations, all of the parishes listed here, have a blue name like a hyperlink. And so if I were to double click on any particular one like St. Martin Parish here, now I get a county-based report just like we saw a few minutes ago for that particular place. So it's two different ways to access the same information. We'll follow that up with the next one down, which is deterministic wind timing. The deterministic wind timing report is also going to list multiple affected localities. However, instead of corresponding to this probabilistic layer, it corresponds to the deterministic forecast wind swath. So if a county is included in that area, there will be timing data for it in the deterministic wind timing report, but it does not take uncertainty into account. Note that there are sections for tropical storm, strong tropical storm, and hurricane force thresholds. And just like the probabilistic wind timing report, we can also double-click on a blue county or parish name to get a county-specific report. If I had points of interest created inside the hazard area, I would also be able to see timing information for my points of interest. They won't show up by default, but if I click Include Points of Interest inside this menu above the report, then I would see those points listed alongside my counties and parishes. Now let's look at some other tips and tricks regarding reports. When I have a long list of many locations like this, I can use the search bar above the report description to quickly narrow down, if I were searching for Jefferson Parish there. I can also collapse the report description to make more room for the information using the arrow in the upper right corner. Now in this particular format, I'm not able to copy and paste these values, so to export this and get it out of HURREVAC, I have two options. In the upper right corner above the report, I can click Export. By doing so, I get a new tab that has a simpler text layout that I can easily print or copy and paste into an email or other document. My other option is click Export to Excel, where I can save this as a .xlsx file on my device. Now moving back down our list of reports, second from the bottom called Evacuation Timing, this is a really critical one because this is where you can do math that computes your clearance times and your custom timeline actions versus those probabilistic times of arrival. And there's a lot more we can get into it. I encourage you to read the description and the user guide page, but I'll show you a couple of things using these test timeline actions I created. One is a 24-hour and another is a 48-hour timeline action for Jefferson Parish. Notice the formatting of the columns means that this one, earliest time of arrival, corresponds to our earliest evacuation or action start time. And the most likely arrival of the wind hazard in the darker blue corresponds to the latest evacuation or action start time in this other darker blue column. So here's how the math works. So just for this example, let's say there's an action that takes 24 hours to complete. We're subtracting that 24 hours from Sunday midnight, which gives us Saturday midnight as our earliest action start time. And in a similar way, subtracting 24 hours from the 5 a.m. Sunday most likely time of arrival gives us a 5 a.m. Saturday latest action start time. So timeline actions would show up here in italics, and if I had clearance times saved in my evacuation scenarios window, those would also be listed here as bold rows. To show you the very last report, wind history, I'm going to advance to the latest advisory for Ida, advisory 29, and let's say that the system is entirely done and moved through, and we want to get some estimate of when the winds started and cleared out of each locality along its path. And so that's what the wind history report will show us. And anywhere that would be in the past actual wind swath here is listed in this report. And like the deterministic report, we have the three thresholds: blue for tropical storm, yellow for strong tropical storm, and red for hurricane. And if a location was not estimated to have been impacted by those winds, it says NA. And remember that this is just an estimate based on those wind extents in each quadrant of the storm and are likely to be an overestimate, especially over land. So for more specific information about observed or measured gusts in any particular location, we would encourage you to check other National Weather Service or NOAA sources. But this can be a good initial estimate of which locations may have been affected. And the final thing to show you is the link to the user guide. In each one of these reports, there's a question mark in the upper right corner, right below the tabs. And clicking on that opens the user guide page that pertains to that particular report. And that's where you can find a whole lot more detail about the sources of this information, what it means, and how you can apply it.